in my previous incarnation, I was a professor. I taught political science at George Washington University. And I think what we need to do is have a baseline and a common denominator. And the common denominator, for me, always starts with history. So, the quick 95-year history. You heard the latest flavor of the month. You just heard from Anthony about the crisis in India and what that meant to a local Jewish community and what that meant to JDC and a global Jewish community. You'll hear later from Shmuley Dritter, who will tell you about the crisis in Georgia in the war between Russia and Georgia just a few months ago. If I was standing here 20 years ago, I'd be telling you the flavor of the day is Ethiopian Jewry. And that, you know, I had just come back from Gondar, Ethiopia, where there were over 30,000 Ethiopian Jews. They wanted to go to Israel. There was a strict Marxist communist regime that wouldn't let them leave. And I'd be saying, oh, you need to go back and advocate for Ethiopian Jewry and do whatever you can to help them be free and go to Israel. If I would have come back a couple of years later, in May of 1991, I would have told you the story of the dramatic airlift, Operation Solomon. 14,235 Jews airlifted from Ethiopia to Israel, and we didn't lose one life in that operation. We gained 2 because there were 2 babies born on the flights from Addis to Jerusalem. If I were standing here 30 years ago, free Soviet Jewry. I would have been talking to you about, you know, what Elie Wiesel called the Jews of silence, because for years American Jewry and nobody talked about what was happening in the Soviet Union to Jews who were living under communism, who were not free to practice their religion, who were not free to emigrate, and not able to live Jewish lives. And we would have gone to Washington in 1988 and marched on the mall with over 400,000 Jews who came to demand freedom for Soviet Jewry. If I were here in the early 50s, I'd be saying, oh, Israel needs your help, because there are Mabarot, there are tent cities that have been built up for the Jewish refugees who came from all of the Arab countries, from Yemen, from Tunisia, from Morocco, and that Israel need help to absorb this million-plus Jews from the Arab world. If I was here in 1946, 47, 48, I'd be telling you it's the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee that's running the displaced persons camps where the remnant survivors of the Holocaust are getting their first hot meal and their first pair of shoes. And if we were all the way back to 1914, I'd be reading you the telegram that's on the inside of our office a couple of blocks away that basically says it was written by the United States ambassador to Turkey, a Jew, who went to Palestine to check on the Jewish chalutzim in Israel and see how the Jewish pioneers were doing. And he found hunger, and he found drought in Palestine, and he came back and he wrote a telegram basically to the alphabet soup of Jewish organizations in New York. Can you raise $50,000 and form a joint distribution committee that will distribute it on behalf of Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, and all the other Jewish groups of the United States? That's how we got this strange name, the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, to be able to give out assistance from North American Jews on behalf of everyone. The idea was that we'd go out of business. 95 years later, you're sitting in a room and I'm telling you the history of this organization, and shortly we'll tell you why we are still in business. And